What if I told you the most hated, oppressed, and legally persecuted group in the world isn't who you think it is? This group is not defined by gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, or political affiliation. It's a group that transcends all these categories. A group whose contributions sustain our entire civilization, yet they are vilified, scapegoated, and treated as criminals from the outset. Their rights are trampled more than any other, and their portrayal in media and entertainment is almost universally hostile. If any other group were treated the way that this group is being treated, there would be chaos in the streets. This group, the most persecuted minority, are the producers, the businessmen. This might be shocking to you. You might be thinking, okay, you're just trolling with us, or aren't you exaggerating a little bit? But no, I'm not. This is an irrefutable fact. No other group in our society faces as many government-imposed regulations and restrictions. No other group is treated like criminals the moment they begin producing wealth. You don't believe me? Let's look at the facts. Businessmen face, more than any other minority, an overwhelming number of laws and regulations, restricting their freedoms without them even committing any crime. No other minority faces as much legal oppression. Unlike actual criminals who are presumed innocent, granted legal representation, and given their day in court before punishment, businessmen are presumed guilty from the start. They face endless audits, arbitrary fines, and crushing regulations without trial, often forced to prove their compliance with an ever-growing web of government-imposed rules before they can even begin their activities. Probably the most glaring example of regulatory oppression are antitrust laws, making businessmen guilty no matter what they do. If they set prices too low, they are accused of predatory pricing or unfair competition. If their prices are too high, they are charged with price gouging or abuse of market power. If their prices are too similar to competitors, they are accused of collusion or price fixing. Even gaining a large market share through efficiency and consumer preferences can be deemed monopolization. The government can and does destroy companies because of those alleged crimes. Remember Standard Oil, AT&T, and most recently Google? These laws do not uphold justice. They function as a weapon to punish success, leaving businessmen operating under constant legal uncertainty and fear. But that's not all. Before businessmen even have a chance to succeed, before they're big enough to attract the leeches in politics, they're buried under a mountain of arbitrary restrictions and limitations. Think about it. Want to start a business? First, you'll need to pay exorbitant fees and navigate a maze of permits and licenses just for permission to operate. Own land? Too bad. Zoning laws dictate what you can build, where, and how. The government, not you, decides what happens on your property. Need to expand? Get ready for a bureaucratic nightmare of land use restrictions, environmental reviews, and endless red tape that can stall or kill your plans. Want to hire the best? Doesn't matter. Sneaky government-imposed diversity mandates override competence and merit. Need to pay fair wages? Sorry, not your call. Minimum wage laws dictate what you must pay your employees, leading to layoffs and fewer opportunities for young and unskilled workers. Need resources from abroad? Too bad. Tariffs and trade restrictions dictate where you can buy and sell, raising costs and limiting your options. Trying to innovate? Good luck. Compulsory licensing laws and patent regulations strip you of control over your own creations, handing power to bureaucrats. Think you can handle the paperwork? Well, think again. Financial reporting mandates bury businesses in compliance costs, making it nearly impossible for startups to compete with corporate giants. Want to build a factory or launch a project? Government agencies can shut you down overnight with arbitrary environmental rules. No justification needed. Finally made it big? Congratulations! Now the government taxes your success, drains your capital, and forces you to fund the very system that shackles you. And the list goes on and on and on. At every turn, the businessman, the producer, the innovator, the wealth creator is shackled, regulated, and penalized for daring to succeed. Imagine the outrage if the government imposed such regulations on, let's say, women, restricting their rights to pursue their own values and ambitions. It would rightfully be condemned as an injustice. Yet, when the same oppressive controls are placed on businessmen, limiting their freedom to produce, trade, and succeed, there is silence. But why? The principle is exactly the same, a fundamental violation of individual rights. Businessmen are portrayed as villains in literature, movies, and public discourse. They are almost always depicted as exploitative, calculating, and immoral, even when they provide enormous values to society. Meanwhile, politicians, regulators, and activists who impose burdens on businesses are depicted as heroes fighting against supposed oppression. I challenge you to name a movie where a billionaire isn't portrayed as the villain. Seriously, can you think of one where a businessman is depicted as a genuine hero, not a corrupt mastermind or a ruthless exploiter? And no, don't bring up Iron Man or Batman. Those types of heroes are portrayed as morally conflicted, burdened by guilt, or deeply flawed. Tony Stark, despite his brilliance, operates on guilt and spends much of his time trying to atone for the wealth he rightfully earned. Bruce Wayne, instead of using his fortune to build and create, chooses a life of suffering and self-denial, embracing a crusade of endless self-sacrifice. Neither is a true representation of a heroic businessman. Now imagine the outrage if any other minority was always portrayed as evil in our movies. Imagine the attention this would get. But for businessmen, nothing. It's just accepted as normal. And it takes a video like this to point at the abnormality of this phenomenon. Think I'm wrong? What did your social media feed look like when this guy decided to murder the CEO of a health insurance company? Was he condemned or celebrated? Be honest. Didn't that prove my point? No other group in society is as routinely expected to sacrifice itself for the greater good as businessmen. Despite being the backbone of economic prosperity, they are not celebrated, not defended, but condemned, treated as mere cash cows, whose moral worth is measured not by their achievements, but by their willingness to surrender their wealth. According to the culture that vilifies him, a businessman's success is never his own. The very moment he creates wealth, he is told that he must give back to society, as if his very act of production was a moral debt, not a virtue. Consider the absurdity of this premise. Imagine telling a scientist, a doctor, or an artist that their work, regardless of how much it benefits the world, is only justified if they hand over a portion of their earnings to be redistributed by force. Yet, this is precisely the standard applied to businessmen. Their wealth is not seen as earned, but as something they must constantly atone for. By funding an ever-expanding welfare state, by financing the very government agencies that regulate and restrict them, and by endlessly proving that they are good through charitable donations. Meanwhile, the very system that bleeds them dry mocks them for their existence. The more they produce, the more they are taxed. The more they succeed, the more they are shackled. The more they hesitate to comply with their role as economic slaves, they are branded as selfish, greedy, or exploitative. Think about this. The top 10% of earners fund the vast majority of the welfare state. Yet, instead of gratitude, they receive nothing but scorn. They are expected to fund every social program, every public service, every handout, while being demonized for the very system that enables such programs to exist in the first place. Is this fair? Of course not, because the underlying assumption is corrupt, that the successful owe society something merely for existing, that wealth belongs not to the creator, but to the collective. that the businessman's moral duty is not to himself, but to everyone else. This is the greatest injustice of all, not merely that businessmen are taxed, regulated, and demonized, but that they are morally condemned for their very nature, that they are asked to exist not as independent men, but as sacrificial offerings on the altar of altruism. And yet, without them, without the producers, the creators, the innovators, what would remain? Stagnation and destruction. So I ask you, why do we tolerate this injustice? And more importantly, how much longer will the men and women of industry allow themselves to be sacrificed? The businessman, the producer, the creator, the innovator is the most persecuted minority in our society. He is regulated, taxed, vilified, and treated as a criminal for the sin of success. And yet, without him, civilization would collapse. It's time to challenge this injustice, to defend the rights of the creators, and to reject the morality of sacrifice that keeps them in chains. If this message resonated with you, like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.